It's a beautiful fall day. It's like September 10th and the water just hit the 60s. I finally am gonna do a swim bait video. I've been trying to do this video for like a year and a half and it just hasn't come together, but today I'm gonna do my best to show you exactly how we catch bass and pike and sometimes even walleyes on these big swim baits in the fall. And the fish are just starting to move up out of deep water. So the further you get into the fall, oftentimes the shallower the fish will get. But right now I'm targeting the edges and we'll see how it goes. We may adjust depending on how we do, but I see a bunch of bait right on the, just on the lip of these drop-offs. There's schools of bait right off this point. So I think we'll probably see some fish there too. There we go. Well, it's a good one. It's a decent one. Oh yeah. Beautiful pike. Exactly what we were looking for. He chomped that swim bait as soon as I got on this spot with all this bait, so I'm guessing he's not the only one here. Nice chunky fish. Let's get him back in the water. There's one. Feels like a decent fish. Much nicer fish than the last couple. There we go. That's more like it. That's a solid largie there. That's probably 3 pounds easy. And just slow rolling that 5-inch swim bait along the weed line. You never know what you're gonna catch. Could be pike, could be walleyes, could be nice bass. Even big crappies will hit that sometimes. So fall is the perfect time to do this as the fish are moving up shallower. And we're just gonna keep fishing here, see what else we can come up with. All right guys, so here's the program today. What I'm doing is I'm targeting the edges of big expansive weed flats. And the reason I'm doing that is in September like this, early fall, those weeds really start to die out and lay down due to lack of sunlight. And what those big game fish are doing is they're waiting to ambush the bluegills and baitfish as they come out of those weed beds and get exposed. So my big 5-inch swim bait I'm throwing is pretty much a perfect imitation for the size baitfish those fish are looking for. They're looking for a good sized meal that they don't have to expend a lot of energy to catch. So far we've been catching largemouth on it, we've been catching a few pike, and I even caught a big dogfish or bowfin a little bit ago that just crushed it. And that just goes to show you that all the game fish in the lake know this is going on and they'll be waiting for those fish. So hopefully we can put a few, oh, there's one. Oh, this is decent. I was just gonna say, hopefully we can put a few more in the boat and got whacked here. Feels like a decent fish. I think it's a pike. Yeah, not a giant, but there's a lot of fish on these weed beds right now, I'll tell you that. And we're gonna continue to catch them. Another nice thing about this bite is it's a sight fishing bite, and it tends to work all day, even in clear water. I found even midday with the sun up, you don't really have to hit it super early, and you can kind of catch fish throughout the day, which is really nice. So there we go. That's a decent fish to start. Not a giant by any means, but munched that swim bait right on this weed line here. Hopefully we got some bigger fish around, but that's a start. All right guys, I fished that first weed line and it was just full of little pike, so I'm gonna try something a little different here. I'm gonna scoot up close to these bulrushes and see if we can't catch a bass or two. I'm gonna switch from just a plain paddle tail to a swim jig. Swim jigs are very, very useful up in the shallow cover. They glide right over the top of it, and we're gonna see if we can catch some fish on that. There's a fish. Oh, big bass, big bass. Big bass. Oh, that's a tank. Oh, this is a tank. We're gonna net this one. Yeah. All right. Look at that, just absolutely choked that swim jig. And he was hanging up right in these bulrushes here. And I love to throw that swim jig when I get into bulrushes and like 2 to 3 foot weeds. It just glides right across the top of them, and bass absolutely love it. So we may fish these bulrushes out and hopefully catch a few more of those, but that's a beauty. There's one. Another fish on the swim jig up in these bulrushes. Definitely seems to be a pattern going on. These largemouth are obviously here, so. Oh, missed one. There's one. Decent fish. Oh yeah. Another nice largie right there. Good 2.5 pounder. Right on the edge of those bulrushes again. They're definitely in there. All right guys, I'm sure I could have kept catching bass, but I kind of want to stick to the plan here, which is throwing big swim baits, primarily for pike, and certainly may catch a bass on them too, but boom, there's a fish. I just moved to this deep weed line, adjacent to the really deep basin here, and figure we might find some bigger fish. And this one is definitely a little bigger. Not huge, but more what we're looking for. And he just inhaled that thing. Holy cow, it's gone. Look at that, absolutely gone. You can't even see that bait in his mouth. That's a 6-inch, or almost 7-inch swim bait, and it's completely engulfed. So these fish are definitely feeding. They're aggressive. So if we can find a couple bigger fish, we're gonna be in good shape. That one's a good eater right there. I might keep that one actually. Nice fish. Not huge, but I think we're definitely on the right track with this move. Just totally engulfed that bait. That's awesome. It's a great fish, great eater. All right, I'll show you guys how I retrieve a swim bait, whether it's on a jig head or rigged weedless like this one. I'm gonna make a long bomb cast, downwind, let it sink only about 2 or 3 seconds, and then I'm just gonna start slow rolling it back. And I wanna roll it just fast enough that I tick weeds once in a while, and that's about it. You don't wanna be yanking it through the weeds, but you also don't wanna be just pulling it over open water. So I try and stay parallel with the weed line, so my cast goes down the weed line and comes back along it, because that's where the concentration of fish are gonna be. And that's pretty much how I fish them. And I'll use a weedless setup like this one if there is a lot of scattered weeds off the weed line like there is in this spot. And if I hook a weed or get snagged up on one, I'll just give it a quick pop and pop that bait out of the weeds like that. And that kind of gives it a little bit of trigger. Sometimes they'll hit it when you pop it off the weed. But oh, there's a fish. Just like that, I just popped it off a weed and he smoked it. Another eater pike. I'm not gonna boat flip him because I think he's gonna come off. But yeah, there you go. Just like I was showing you. Pop it off that weed, and as soon as it ripped off the weed, he crushed it. All right guys, so let's talk rigging. When I'm rigging swim baits, there's 3 basic ways that I rig them. The first way is going to be weedless, and this is great when you've got thick weeds like I was fishing some today. And this is a weedless swim bait hook. They typically have a weight underneath to kind of keep that keel action going, keep that bait upright. And this is actually a 3/8 ounce
swim bait hook here, and I've added a 1/4 ounce slip sinker ahead of that just to get that bait down a little bit deeper. And that's perfect. That's been running right where I want it. And you can add as much weight up front as you need to make that jig dive. You know, if you're fishing 12, 15 foot weeds, you want to have probably a 1/2 ounce up there. And here's the second way that I rig swim baits, and I do rig swim baits on jig heads like this a lot. So this one I actually turned sideways to gain more purchase with the hook here because he's been pretty beat up. And you can flip them upside down, you can flip them to either side, and that'll give you a little more life out of the bait. But the key is, no matter how you rig them, you want them to be straight. Perfectly straight with the hook, that way, that way, that way. Rig them straight and they will run right. You definitely don't want to have, you know, have a curve in the bait where it's curved like this or pushed too far up like that. You want it just perfectly straight with the hook like so. And then the third way that I'll rig swim baits is actually on a swim jig. And this is what I was using earlier this morning for the bass. And this goes through cover really nice. You can fish it a little bit slower, and the skirt adds a little bit of action to it. It seems like a lot of times largemouth prefer a swim jig to a straight swim bait. So if I'm specifically targeting largemouth, I'll oftentimes fish a swim jig up shallower. So, and then this time of year when I'm fishing this bluegill pattern like I have been, I do want chartreuses, blues, bluegill patterns like this, and I'm usually using 4 to 6 inch swim baits. The reason for that is there's a lot of young into year bait fish this time of year, and they are usually about 3 inches, 2 to 3 inches long. And if you're using smaller swim baits, they tend to kind of blend in with those small bait fish. So I like to use something a little bit bigger that stands out and the fish can kind of key in on. You know, a lot of guys I think rig swim bait jigs too light, and they're just in that top 2 feet of water column, and that's as deep as they get. So don't be afraid to put an ounce or even more on there to get it down on those deeper weeds. Now I really like to use bluegill patterns like this Storm Largo shad. It's a really nice paint scheme on that thing, and the reason I like to use bluegill is because that's what these fish are eating. Like I said before, they're waiting on those schools of bluegills to get kind of pushed out of the weed beds, and that's their primary forage in a lot of these lakes up here anyway, is baby bluegills. So I kind of want to match the hatch and have something that looks like what they're naturally feeding on. There's a good fish. That's a good fish. Ooh, he got down in the slop. It's a nice largemouth, but he dove down in that mat of milfoil. There we go, nice largemouth. Hit that 5-inch Berkeley hollow belly up in the milfoil. Really nice chunker, a couple pounds. Good fish. Good fish. Again, I noticed a whole bunch of bait stacked up right here, and I'm guessing that's not the only fish around. I kind of moved from a couple different spots here, and this is actually a bigger weed bed. Not really necessarily close to deep water, but it is holding a lot of bait, and that is usually the key for this swim bait bite. So we'll fish this out and see if we can get a couple more. Man, there's just tons of bait here. Loads and loads of bait. Oh yeah, right there. Oh man, he hit it literally as I was pulling it out of the water. Another nice pike here. Oh, that's awesome. That's another good eater. Again, not a giant, but man, did he just crush that right next to the boat. I almost had it out of the water and he came literally straight up on it. But good eater fish. We'll keep that one for the table too. 2 pikes about right. You can use either a bait caster or a spinning rod, heavy action spinning rod for these baits. And either way, I'm gonna run about 20-pound braid and 20-pound to 25-pound fluoro leader. about 6 feet a leader with a FG knot, or a double uni to the leader. So there's a couple reasons for that, but one reason is abrasion. Pike's teeth like to cut anything smaller than that, and also visibility. I like to have that fluoro leader on there to reduce the visibility. So, and also making that 6 foot leader gives it a little bit of extra cushion when you're fighting that fish at the end of the fight, a little bit of stretch at the end of the rod. So caught some fish today, it was fun, and I'd like to do it again here. We'll see how the fall goes, but we got some fish to eat tonight, a couple nice pike, and that's all you can ask for. It's a beautiful day, can't beat it. I'll see you next time, guys. Get hooked up.